Hello, everyone. Today I wanted to talk about it's a very important topic, and I think in the beginning of your recovery, it's not as clear. Then the farther you get along in your recovery, you start to notice things that makes this subject become a little bit easier, and that is concern versus fear. So in the beginning of recovery, we have fears. That's what happened. We had a situation happen and which turned on the OCD gene or whatever you want to call it. And we became very scared of something, very irrationally scared. And then we started avoiding and so on and so forth. And it began the loop. Excuse me. And this is where the OCD loop began. And we really didn't even know what was going on at the time. For me, for somatic OCD, it happened so quickly. It was like my life changed in a light switch, and just boom, I didn't know what was going on. I was so scared. Everything seemed very unreal. I had depersonalization and so on and so forth. So I was very, very fearful of my sensations, or all sensations, that is. The beginning it was blinking. And that only lasted a couple weeks, and then went to salivation. That lasted for about 9 months, and now it's salivation, swallowing, and so on and so forth. I also am very hyper aware of clothing and stuff like that, but that's besides the point. But what happened was I became very afraid, and I wasn't concerned, as say maybe someone who didn't have OCD would say, well, we all salivate, swallow, breathe, and feel our heartbeat from time to time. Why are you freaking out over it? But what happened was with OCD, the fear set in, and the fear cycle, or as Dr. Claire Weeks calls it, the adrenaline releasing nerve cycle, where, you're just pumping out the anxiety hormones over and over and over again and keeping yourself in that cycle. It's very hard to just be concerned, and rightfully so. So in the beginning, what I experienced was you probably will not be concerned. You're going to be very afraid. And again, rightfully so. You have now put yourself in a situation where you have shown yourself you are very scared, very scared. Not just afraid. You are fearful, extremely fearful of your specific fears. And mine was being stuck forever, or being hyper aware, and how the hyper awareness would ruin my life, and how if I had chronic anxiety, I wouldn't be able to progress in the gym how I wanted to, and how it would stop me from doing all these fun things. And it took me about 4 months of consistent recovery work, taking out some things in my life that were not good for me, and beginning to realize, not realizing, the beginning stages of realization and acceptance that these aren't as bad as I'm making them out to be. But it took me a while to even realize that. And then it was a very slow, gradual progression, which I'm still in the beginning stages, I would say, for the most part. But again, I've made great improvements. But concern is something that, we all have concerns. It would be a little irrational to think that nobody has any concerns in their life. But that's a different topic. So let me use a good example. Crossing the street. Someone might have a very bad irrational fear that if they cross a street, they're going to get hit and killed, so they avoid streets, all streets, crosswalks, and so on and so forth. But the person that just has concern says, I'm going to check when the light is, make sure the light isn't, red for me, and then I'm going to cross the street, and we'll be concerned about traffic. I grew up outside New York City, so this is a good example for someone like me, even though I don't have these particular fears. But the concerned aspect, when you get to an area of concern, you no longer will be fearful. But this is a process that happens not in a very short period of time, because what we see in the OCD community is we like to think in black and white, rightfully so. We like to think in musts, shoulds, have-nots, very irrational things. And this is where the teachings of Dr. Albert Ellis really comes into play through cognitive behavioral therapy. Excuse me. Amazing. Almost knocked it over. So, but this is huge. And like I said, I like using myself as an example because I don't know anyone else's journey. I just know myself. I just know what I've done and what's helped me, what hasn't helped me. And there's been a lot of things that hasn't helped me. But being extremely fearful is one of the things that really kept me locked. I was so afraid of so many different things. But once I got to a point where I wasn't as afraid, that's when the concern started to slip in. So it's almost like if you ever seen that upside down sand where the sand comes down, when you flip it over, the top is filled, and that's fear. That's actually a really good example. The topic is fear. And then as the sand starts to go down, it turns into concern. And then the sand coming through the funnel is actually recovery, which is an interesting way to look at it, but it's a really good way to look at it. Because one of the biggest mistakes that people make in the OCD community, helping people and people suffering, is that, I want to accept right now, I want to not be afraid, and so forth. So you could tell yourself that you're not afraid and you just are concerned, but your brain is on a whole different level, a whole nother level. So, this is why Rob uses the example of the spider. Like, I'm accepting I'm not afraid of spiders. I'm accepting I'm not afraid of spiders, but you go to put your hand in it, your brain, no, you are still afraid of spiders. So, right now I'm at a much more accepting place of general concern for my anxiety. I still have really bad days where it's 10 out of 10 for sometimes 3. I just had a bout last week where I was about 10 out of 10 anxiety for about 72 hours. And, I have to do things, you got to go through. And those are the moments that are gonna help you turn fear into concern. It's not the good moments. I know it's a very cliche statement, and I'm not really big on cliche statements, but growing through pain, it really does have some truth to it, especially with OCD recovery. Because if you cripple in the down moments, which you're going to in the beginning, don't think you're going to be perfect, because you won't. But when you practice and you get better and you work at acceptance and you go through this journey, what happens is those bad moments, even if they're as traumatic in the moment, the way you handle them is better. And that's an improvement. So it might seem like you're still deathly afraid, but you're actually working towards concern. And again, concern doesn't happen overnight. I can't say this enough, but it really needs to be repeated multiple times. The patience and persistence going back to that when it comes to concern, you're not just going to grab concern overnight. The fear, especially, how long you've been fearful. And another quick myth is no matter how long you've been afraid of something, you can always recover. So, or else we wouldn't have people that would have certain conditions. Some people have been in this bad spot for 2 years. Some have been in this bad spot for 30 years, but they all still recover if they put the work in and so forth. But, just a couple takeaway tips, as I said, for me, it took me about 4 months to actually start feeling some relief. 4 months. Whoa. That's a long time, It's not a long time in the grand scheme of life, but when you're suffering it seems a little longer. But things started to change. My wife started to notice differences. I think my friends started to notice differences. And then every once in a while, you have one of those aha moments where you say to yourself, whoa, I'm not as afraid anymore. Or maybe when I'm doing this one thing, it's not as fearful as it was before, So maybe for me, for an example, like, going to work, I was so afraid I was going to be stuck with my sensations. No! And now I'll work 14 hours and say, whoa, I couldn't even do that before. I couldn't even work 5 minutes in my mind. I could have, but I convinced myself through the fear that I couldn't do it. But now it's gone down to concern. And I would say it's about a split ratio. 50% fear, 50% ratio. I'm 50% concerned, teetering back and forth. Some days more fearful, some days more concerned. And I don't put any merit on those feelings. I just go and experience the day. And that is a super important aspect of recovery. So, guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. This topic is super important, and I'm glad we got to talk about it. Again, feel free to message me down below. I love communicating in the OCD community. It's probably my favorite thing. It's funny when you go through OCD recovery, you don't think that this community would really transform your life in such a way that it is just amazing. I love the OCD community. It has done great things for my life. I've met tremendous people, and it is just a great place to be. Whether you're suffering or not suffering, we're all here to help each other and lift each other up. So again, thank you for listening, guys. I hope you have a tremendous day. Thank you.